Hello, in this webinar I'm going to be talking a little bit about the I-9 or Program Summary Form. As we've mentioned with all of our webinars, while we are striving to provide you with the most up-to-date and accurate legal information, also understand that IEP teams make decisions about individual students, and so you need to take our information, but also talk about if you have different situations with kids in your building or that you're writing IEPs for. Some of what you may do may differ slightly. So work with your LEAs, work with your teams, and contact Kari or myself if you have further questions. So today, the I-9 form we're going to talk a little bit about. Before we dive into the specifics of the form, I do want you to think about the form in terms of it being similar to a contract that we have with the parent. So the goal of the I-9 form should be to provide parents with a really specific and clear picture of exactly what we're going to be doing to help their student achieve their IEP goals. So what services and supports we'll be providing to their student, how often, where we're providing those services, and the duration of those services that we're going to be providing their student to make progress and achieve their IEP goals. All right, and before I begin, I also want to say that remember too that parents have to be provided with a final copy of the IEP prior to implementing that IEP. Our past practice had been that a draft IEP was enough and appropriate, but it is in fact not enough or appropriate. We have to have a final draft of the IEP to the parent before the IEP actually begins. All right, so let's dig in a little bit. Program summary, beginning and ending dates. I don't know that this is too much of an issue. The beginning service dates are going to go here. The ending service date is going to go there. The ending service date should be a year minus a day. So 364 days from the start date of the IEP. There may be some cases in which that's different, but by and large your IEPs are going to be 1 year's duration. This form also asks us to look at physical education and vocational education and to make a determination as to whether they're going to be receiving regular physical and vocational education or specially designed. If they receive specially designed physical education or vocational education, it is then considered a special education service. So check, and if the physical education that they're going to be receiving is specially designed, check the specially designed. In terms of vocational education, there tends to be questions about this, and so I just put the definition from DPI in there, which is vocational education refers to organized educational programs that are directly related to the preparation for paid or unpaid employment or for additional preparation for a career not requiring a baccalaureate or advanced degree. So if you're going to be providing special education services specific to vocational education, you would click on the specially designed and go from there. All right, let's get into it then a little bit deeper, or I should say at least a little bit further down the form. Section 1, special education. Special education refers to the specialized instruction that we're going to be providing that student. And this is instruction that's provided by a special education teacher or perhaps a speech pathologist, but not an aide. So this is specialized, this is teacher instruction. The descriptions we put in this section should be clear, and they should represent the specific skills that we're working on with that student. We should not be lumping in multiple skills together. We should be separating them out. So if we're providing the student with reading, math, and writing, we should have 3 areas on the form where we're specifying what we're working on, the frequency, amount, location, and duration. And I gave a couple of examples below. Instruction to build reading comprehension skills, or instruction in anger management and social skills. So again, a little bit more specific than just saying reading. At least a little bit more information. Frequency and amount. So frequency should be represented as minutes per week or minutes per day. And remember, minutes in this section should represent the actual number of minutes that we are providing service to the student. It's not an approximation. So when we say, as an example, 20 minutes 3 times a week, by and large, we should be providing 20 minutes 3 times a week. It's not an approximation. So that's one example. 40 minutes per week is another example, or 1 hour daily is another example that we gave. I also provided some non-examples. So putting ranges in here is not appropriate. Minimums, not appropriate. As needed, not appropriate. When appropriate, not appropriate. Available daily, do not use, and 1 class period per day, do not use either. So please stick to this format up here. Location. Location should either be special education setting or regular education setting. My one non-example is regular or special education setting. We have to be specific about where we're providing services to the student and what environment we're providing those in. Now, there might be some cases in which reading might be an example of service that you might be providing service to that student 3 times a week for 20 minutes in a special education setting, but you're also supporting and providing instruction within the classroom setting. So in that case, you would have 2 lines for reading, one that would represent the frequency and amount of the service that you are providing for the special education classroom, and one for the frequency and amount of the service you are providing within the regular education location. Duration. Generally, this section can and should be left blank because most of the things that we do for an IEP are going to be for the duration of the IEP, and it's not necessary to put duration of IEP under duration. But there might be some cases in which the duration of the IEP will be shorter. So some examples might be for students who are transitioning from middle to high school. If the service that we're going to provide is going to change at the high school, we would terminate that service at the end of the year, but then have the service we would be providing that might look a little different at the high school underneath that. Another time that you might use duration is if you're providing the student with an intervention that's like a certain number of sessions or over a certain time period. Again, this helps parents understand exactly who's working with the student, what we're working on, and how long we're working on it, and where we're providing that service. So let's jump down here a bit to related services. Now, related services are services that we provide that support the primary special education program, or the program that's under Section 1. In terms of frequency and amount, so under related service, you're gonna want to describe, or you're gonna want to, well, you don't need to describe. You actually can put the frequency and amount next to the service that you choose here. Under frequency and amount, the same guidelines apply as in Section 1. Location, same guidelines apply as in Section 1. And duration, same guidelines are going to apply as Section 1. So please use those same guidelines. Jumping down to supplementary aids and services. The supplementary aids and services are different in that the purpose of them is to maximize the amount of time that students can spend with their non-disabled peers within the regular education environment. So under the supplementary aids and services box, you'd be indicating what services or supports you're specifically providing to that student. Now, frequency and amount is a little different because we wouldn't necessarily, it's not instruction per se, it's support. So it may be it's more conditional rather than just minutes per week. So some examples of how you might write that up is when a student does this, then we would provide this. So providing access to a computer lab for writing assignments, or up a little bit here, providing highlighted text during science class. So these are specific things that we are going to provide to a student to allow them to participate with their regular ed peers in the regular ed setting. We have some non-examples for this as well. As needed is not appropriate. As appropriate is, again, not appropriate. Upon student request, available daily, when teacher deems appropriate, and minimum are all not appropriate examples and should not be used. Location. Now, generally speaking, because the purpose of supplementary aids and services are to allow students to participate with their regular ed peers, generally speaking, the location will be within the general education or regular education setting. However, we do have circumstances, I just use the example of a student who may need to cool down if they get upset, and they may need a place to go where they're working on some strategies. That might be the special education classroom. So it's fine to use special education as a location, but remember that the goal of supplementary aids and services is in fact to keep the student within the regular ed setting or allow them to participate. In terms of duration, the same guidelines apply as in the other sections. Program modifications or supports. So program modifications refers to activities that we are going to do to support the adults working with the student. And program modifications are ways that we are going to modify the student's program to meet their needs. So some examples of service and support might be consultation between regular ed and special ed teacher, or staff training and nonviolent crisis prevention intervention. Those are two examples. And program modification examples, I've included a couple: shortened day, modified grading, and class substitution. Now, in terms of frequency and amount, I think, again, you can refer to section 1 above, but I want to remind everyone that just as with the other sections of the IEP, don't fail to comply with what we say we're going to do. If we say that we are going to be meeting with a regular ed teacher or consulting with a regular ed teacher once a week for 30 minutes, then we need to be consulting with that regular education teacher once a week for 30 minutes. It can't be, well, it's just when I catch them. When we write it in an IEP, it must happen. So make sure that if we're writing it in there, and it's very appropriate to write it in there, but make sure it then happens. Location, complete this section of the IEP as appropriate, considering the service and support that we're providing to the student. And duration, again, same as section 1 above. Participation in regular education classes. Now remember that all students have a legal right to be educated to the maximum extent that's appropriate with their non-disabled peers within a regular education setting. This question is asking us where the student will be taught, not what they're going to be taught. So this isn't a curriculum question, this is a place question. When we remove students from the regular ed setting, this should only be occurring when we cannot meet their needs within the regular ed setting, and even with the use of supplementary aids and services. So we have to be thoughtful about times when we remove students. But of course we know that it's very appropriate to move students for that specialized instruction oftentimes. If under any the sections above where we're talking about services that are provided to the student, if we indicate that it is in a special education setting, then we would need to make sure that we are checking the box that says they are not participating with their non-disabled peers. If all of our services and supports are within the regular education setting, then we would indicate the top box. If we have checked no, that we wouldn't be providing, or that the student is not going to be full-time with their non-disabled peers in regular ed classes, we have to provide a description of why this full-time participation with non-disabled peers is not appropriate for the student. Participation in extracurricular or non-academic activities. We also have to take steps to provide equal access for all students to ensure that they also are able to participate in extracurricular non-academic activities. And some of the steps that we may could include providing supplementary aids and supports to allow for their participation. If we believe that a student is able to participate but would require supplementary aids and services to do so, we need to indicate that below. Okay, so we would be indicating that down here. If we believe that for some reason a student is not able to participate, we must also indicate down below the extent to which the student will not be involved in extracurricular activities with non-disabled peers. So I know this was a quick whip through the form, but hopefully it made some sense. Thank you very much.